Hello, everyone. Welcome. So glad you joined us. If you are joining us live, it is February 14th, Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. We are here today for UEB with Nemeth, Bubbles and Beyond, with Kyle DeJute. Just one second. I got a message saying that the chat is disabled. So let me see if I can fix that. It's not telling me that it's disabled. Oh, here. I think I got it. Let me try. I need to change my settings. So sorry to everyone. Try again. Okay. I think it's working now. Sorry about that. Must be something on the back end that Zoom has changed their settings a little. They do tend to do that to us. I apologize. But once again, we are here with Kyle DeJute for UEB with Nemeth. If you need closed captions, please feel free to do that. And the directions are on the screen. You just go to live transcripts and then choose the show subtitles option. We are hoping that you contribute to the conversation today. That's why we are here. Please use the chat panel. We want to make sure that everyone can see the comments and questions. So please choose everyone from the chat conversation panel. Our agenda today, we're going to do welcome and introductions. Then Kyle is going to present. I am going to give you evaluation and in-service credit. And then we will be adjourning. Okay. We do have handouts available on our website. It's FIMC-VI.org under events. And there will be a recording of this that is also available that you can go back to and refer to at any time. So if you would like in-service credit, you can get ACV REP credit. You will need the magic code. The opening code is switch. And I am going to put that in the chat box. The opening code is switch. At the end of the presentation, I will explain to you exactly how you go about getting that credit. Okay. So our objectives today include being able to identify for a Braille transcription using UEB with Nemeth at least 3 categories of material that must be within Nemeth Code switch indicators, and at least 2 categories of material that should be in UEB. You should be able to locate primary sources of code symbols, and you should be able to explain where UEB technical symbols will appear. We'd like to welcome Kyle. She has presented with us before, and we always love to have her. Her formal title is Braille Trainer at the American Printing House for the Blind. In that role, she supports other APH employees as they work towards Braille certifications. She creates and presents trainings on software, agency specifications, and Braille codes, and she replies to Braille-related questions from across the country and across the company. She loves finding new ways to talk about Braille codes. Kyle is a National Library Service certified Braille transcriber and holds the following additional certifications: Letter of Proficiency in Unified English Braille, or UEB, from NLS, Unified UEB from the Australian Royal Institute for Deaf and Blind Children, Nemeth Code from NLS, and Braille textbook formatting from National Braille Association. So as you can tell, she is more than qualified to talk to us today. Very excited for her presentation. I do also want to welcome Allie and Jessica. They are our captioners today, so we appreciate them being with us. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Kyle.
Well, hello. I'm going to get my sharing stuff sorted here so we can be looking at the same things. That is not. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
We're doing it.
You're doing it.
Well, I'm Kyle. We're going to talk about Nemeth today. In true overkill fashion, I included the description for this webinar, which you've probably already read in choosing to be here. We've already gone through the talkative objectives for today. Let's do a quick overview, the quick and dirty short version of why are we here today. When we leave, we're going to be better able to describe what must be in Nemeth Code, what must be in UEB, know for sure what our resources are for a UEB with Nemeth transcription. And we are also here to address your questions. So I know we've said it before, but please use the chat while you're here in person, and my contact information will be at the end of this presentation. Please reach out when you have a specific question, because nothing clarifies and solidifies the theoretical stuff we're going to talk about today, like getting that theory dirty with the material you're actually transcribing, having a concrete example and an answer based on, what you think is going on. All that is to say, please share your questions as we wade through what's got to be in Nemeth, what's got to be in UEB, and when we need to look stuff up, what are our primary resources. First of all, a little bit of time-sensitive context. This is twofold here. Today, while we're presenting, is Valentine's Day, so you might notice there are some Valentine's-style references, and the usual APH presentation template is embellished with hearts on a lot of the screens, not only because we love UEB with Nemeth and we love Nemeth Code, but also because it's Valentine's Day. So we've done some heart embellishing today. The other contextual note, which is more important, is what's going on with the Nemeth Code right now, today, February 14th, 2023. So a new, updated, complete Nemeth Code is the Nemeth Braille Code for Mathematics and Science Notation 2022. The content of this code, complete with examples, explanation, etc., was officially approved by the BANA, Braille Authority of North America board on December 12th, 2022. So we just passed 2 months from that being approved. That code, the 2022 Nemeth Braille Code, is now being made ready for sharing for publication on BANA's website, and more on other ways you can get it in a moment. The new Nemeth Code, which, like I said, has been written and approved, the files are getting ready to be put out into the world. That code is the result of incorporating the guidance for transcription using Nemeth Code within UEB contexts, the most recent version of which is from 2018. And that is the document about how Nemeth Code works within UEB, or basically how UEB with Nemeth works. The 2022 Nemeth Code is also the result of incorporating all posted Nemeth Code updates. So this is everything from the moment after the 1972 Nemeth Code was published up until now, all updates and errata. So the 2022 Nemeth Code is all of those things put together into one complete code. In addition to, once it's fully accessible and put together, the Nemeth Code is going to be posted on brailleauthority.org website. It will also be possible, once the code is ready for sharing, to purchase a hard copy of the Nemeth Code from APH. And as with all BANA code books, that Nemeth Code hard copy will be available for purchase with federal quota funds. And that's what's happening in the greater context of the Nemeth Code. A 2022 new, totally incorporated Nemeth Code has been approved. It is being gotten ready for sharing and will be published on the BANA website and available for purchase from APH. Right now, today, February 14th, 2023, look at my date being so wrong. That's so embarrassing. The guidance for transcription using the Nemeth Code within UEB contexts and the 1972 Nemeth Code for mathematics and science notation, as well as its updates, are what we have available to us. So that's today. I mean, let's be a little persnickety here. I'm going to just adjust that date because today is February 14th, 2023, and we are talking about really time-specific stuff. Today, if we were going to look something up in our primary resources, it would be the 1972 Nemeth Code and the supporting guidance for transcription using Nemeth Code in UEB contexts. And that will be the case until the 2022 Nemeth Code is shared out via BANA's website and available for sale from APH. Something else that's available today and is not a code book, not a primary source, is the Introduction to Braille Mathematics using UEB with Nemeth 2022. So this is the course manual for the NLS Nemeth transcription course, the NLS Mathematics Braille transcribing course, which you can access through NFB's website. This instruction manual is, again, not a code book. It's not a primary source. Our primary source, our foundational information, is, for this instruction manual, is the Nemeth Braille Code for Mathematics and Science Notation 2022. 2022. So that's another thing to look things up in today. And I just want to say one more time, this instruction manual, while very helpful, is based on the Nemeth Code. It is not in itself a code book. There is related information. Please let me draw your attention to the glowing neon heart on a brick wall. It's neon because that's a really cool chemical that when you just send a current through it, it glows. So we can talk about the chemistry code, which is a Nemeth Code based code and a fully incorporated, updated to jive with the 2022 Nemeth Code. Chemistry code is about to get into review by the BANA board. The Nemeth Code has been approved, and then this chemistry code based on that new 2022 Nemeth Code is written and is going to have its T's crossed and I's dotted by BANA board members. Today, February 14th, 2023, the chemistry code resources that are available to us, because the 2022 chemistry code has not been approved, is not available. What we can get to is the provisional guidance for chemistry notation using Nemeth in UEB contexts. And that is on BANA's website. Let's go visit BANA's website for the Nemeth Code and also to glance at where the chemistry code is. So if I were booping around on the internet and I went to brailleauthority.org, under codebooks and guidelines, under Nemeth Code, the guidance for transcription using Nemeth Code within UEB contexts is the first thing listed. Then graphing calculator guidelines, which I don't expect us to talk about today, but is another Nemeth Code based guidelines document, and the provisional guidance for chemistry notation using Nemeth in UEB contexts. All those are available from brailleauthority.org/Nemeth-code. And last but not least, in regards to the chemistry code, that provisional guidance that we just saw on BANA's website, which is available today, right now, is based on or builds on the 1997 Braille code for chemical notation, which is the only chemistry code that has been approved and that's anywhere out for reference. Because the 2022 chemistry code has not yet been approved. It is about, the BANA board is about to look at it. All right. That's enough for context. Here's a happy little koala exploding out of a box with a bunch of hearts because I'd love to give you a moment to reflect on some information. Here comes a quiz. Which of the following resources is not a rule book or part of a rule book? There are 4 answer choices. A, Nemeth Code for Mathematics and Science Notation, 1972 revision. B, An Introduction to Braille Mathematics using UEB with Nemeth 2022. C, the Nemeth Braille Code for Mathematics and Science Notation 2022. Or D, all errata applicable to the 1972 revision of the Nemeth Code. Which of those is not a rulebook or part of a rulebook? If you're here, you can drop your answer A, B, C, or D in the chat. Got a couple of answers. Give it another moment. That's like a happy little hive over there. B, 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 B. Yeah, absolutely. The only resource shown here that is not a rulebook or part of a rulebook is the instructional or secondary resource, An Introduction to Braille Mathematics using UEB with Nemeth 2022. It's just a course book. A secondary resource, it is explanations and illustrations based on the 2022 Nemeth Code. And I could talk that to death because I really love that resource. Thank you for engaging with a quiz. Right then. Why do I keep saying UEB with Nemeth? The name of the guidance document is Guidance for Transcription Using Nemeth Code Within UEB Contexts. It doesn't say UEB with Nemeth. Maybe the course manual does, but the term UEB with Nemeth and its complementary term, UEB Math/Science, you probably already know this, came about because the Braille Authority of North America, BANA, adopted a document entitled Terminology, UEB Math/Science, and UEB with Nemeth. That was adopted officially in 2020 and is available from BANA's website. And that document basically says, hey, these are the terms we suggest everybody use because they are clear in many different arenas, from ordering to IEP discussion to cataloging books that already exist. And they are clear and practical in ways that some of our longer phrases, like Nemeth within UEB contexts, and some of our less specific phrases, like Nemeth, are not as clear. All right, get out your forks. It's time for the meat. What must be in Nemeth Code, and a little bit of why. Here's my sweetened condensed milk version. This is just short and sweet. Symbols and expressions for which there are Nemeth Code rules. If the Nemeth Code provides a symbol, provides specific rules for how to transcribe something, then it needs to be in Nemeth Code. It needs to be between code switch indicators if we are doing a UEB with Nemeth transcription. And 2, there's only 2 points to this summary of what needs to be in Nemeth Code. Expressions that indicate calculation. So I'm thinking here about things like miles per hour, miles/hour. I mean, that basically means miles divided by hours. Or the line between parts of a fraction also indicates calculation. All of our symbols of operation, the plus, the minus, the dividing sign, indicate calculation. I could go on. This is the way that I make annoyingly short and sweet the description of what has to be in Nemeth Code when we're working in UEB with Nemeth. Now, like sweetened condensed milk, this very short summary of what needs to be in Nemeth Code is only appealing sometimes, is only useful in certain times, because it's just not flexible enough. It's not clear enough. Like I would never put sweetened condensed milk on my cereal because it is not an everyday sort of thing. And the sort of elevator speech, the very short and sweet version of what must be in Nemeth Code is if there is a specific and explicit Nemeth Code rule about it, then it needs to be in Nemeth Code. If what you're dealing with indicates calculation, says, hey, this is changing the value of that, then it probably needs to be in Nemeth Code. But moving on from the oh too sweet, oh too short summary, there are 12 pretty specific, much more clear and flexible items that must be in Nemeth Code. So this is what makes up most of Rule 4 in the 2022 Nemeth Code. And some of the things that must be in Nemeth Code include abbreviated function names, because there is a specific and explicit series of rules about TAN, like for tangent, COS, like for cosine, and other abbreviated function names. Some of the other 12 things that must be in Nemeth Code include chemical notation, because chemistry is always technical, or math, or let's call it technical. Fraction, we already touched on that earlier, right? That fraction line basically indicates division, and it indicates calculation. A series of letters, very similarly to a fraction, when two letters are right next to each other and they're indicating multiplication, then that is indicating calculation. That's a mathematical expression and must be in Nemeth Code. Similarly, a series of letters that names a shape has to be in Nemeth Code, or a letter that names a shape, or a letter that is the argument of a function. We're going to go more in depth with all of these. There are a few more things over in the right-hand column, a modified letter, a modified number. So a letter that or a number that's combined with something like a currency symbol or a superscript, any Nemeth Code symbol, so we can be consistent. We don't, where we can get away with it, we don't want to have a % in loads of different codes. Number lines always go in Nemeth Code in a UEB with Nemeth transcription. And again, that short and sweet summary that we had earlier included mention of things that have a Nemeth Code rule for them. So there's a really specific Nemeth Code rule for partitioned numbers, numbers whose parts are separated by a space instead of like a decimal or a comma. And so those kinds of partitioned numbers have to be in Nemeth Code because there's a Nemeth Code rule specifically about them. Probability statements and slash, which basically means division if it's in mathematical context. That was a quick overview of things that must be in Nemeth Code. And when I say in Nemeth Code, I mean, we're working already. We've already decided this is going to be a UEB with Nemeth transcription. And then when things are in the Nemeth Code, I tend to refer to that space as a bubble, because bubbles are pretty. They're sort of rainbow and light and ephemeral, and that happy imagery sometimes helps me feel less frustrated by the this very detail-oriented work of making a UEB with Nemeth Code transcription. And those bubbles that I'm talking about are the content between an opening Nemeth Code indicator and a Nemeth Code terminator. Up on the screen is a slide with some more beautiful bubbles and a kid raptly watching them float on the breeze, but also a identification of the opening Nemeth Code indicator, which is just for our convenience, preceded by the 2-cell dot locator for mention. So this is dots 4, 6, and a full cell. And then our actual opening Nemeth Code indicator is 2 cells. It's 4, 5, 6, and 1, 4, 6. And so that says whatever comes after this is in Nemeth Code until you get to the Nemeth Code terminator, which on our screen here is identified. It's preceded by the UEB.locator for mention because we're talking about this symbol. We're not using it to enclose Nemeth Code right now. And that Nemeth Code terminator itself is 2 cells. It's dots 4, 5, 6, and 1, 5, 6. So what happens between those, I regularly refer to as a bubble of Nemeth code. It is Valentine's Day today, so maybe we could refer to our bubbles as love notes. And we don't want them to be too long because then they would be big enough that we would maybe get caught passing them in class. It's certainly another fun and lighthearted way to think about the detail-oriented work of making a UEB with Nemeth transcription. If we think about what happens between the opening Nemeth code indicator and the Nemeth code terminator as a little love note, like this one pictured here, an envelope wrapped in twine with some lavender tucked into the twine. All right, we went through 12 things earlier pretty quickly. Let's take a little more time to have them go one by one. And this is a time that I'm particularly open to, particularly looking for questions about what these things mean. An abbreviated function name must be in Nemeth code. And I say abbreviated because if we're just talking about the idea of C-O-S-I-N-E, cosine, all spelled out, that's not abbreviated. And if it's part of a further equation, like it has an equal sign right after it, then it probably needs to be in Nemeth code. But anywhere that we use COS, the abbreviation for cosine, that has to be in Nemeth code. So abbreviated function names are always in Nemeth code. Any chemical notation, and we know, I think we're mostly familiar with the idea that like something like CO2 or NaCl. CO2 is carbon dioxide, NaCl is what, table salt? Those sorts of chemical equations or formulae need to be in Nemeth code. And even something that's as basic chemistry as C for carbon should be in Nemeth code, must be in Nemeth code according to our 2022 Nemeth code rules. And that's because that C is not a variable. It's not like it can mean any number of things. It's basically just a letter. It is the signpost, the name of the designation of a chemical element. So any letter for a chemical element, any of those letters that appears on the periodic table must be in Nemeth code. I'm just going to take a drink of H2O now while we get ready to go to item 3. Fractions. Fractions go in Nemeth code. Not only is the line between the numerator and the denominator indicating calculation, because a fraction at a very basic level indicates the numerator is divided by the denominator, there are also very explicit and specific Nemeth code rules for how to transcribe fractions. So they must be in Nemeth code. A series of letters or a letter associated with a shape or an abbreviated function name. So if the letter is naming a shape, has to be in Nemeth code. If the series of letters is being multiplied together, that's indicating calculation. It's got to be in Nemeth code. A modified letter. So a letter that has a prime after it, or heavens, a superscript for sure. That's not just an individual hanging out letter. That is a modified letter combined with something and it has to be in Nemeth code. Our modified number, similar thing. A number next to a symbol of currency. So anytime there's money involved, it's got to be in Nemeth code. A Nemeth code symbol. So we're talking about percent, degree, per meal, equals, greater than, less than, multiplication, and Greek letters. Those have specifics and explicit symbols in the Nemeth code and have to be in a Nemeth code bubble or love note. Number lines. Number lines are just always in Nemeth code in a UEB with Nemeth transcription. They indicate calculation, right? Is how I think about it. A number line. Because, well, maybe maybe not everybody has this memory, but it was such a big deal in elementary school when we got that taped number line at the top of our desk. So you could put your finger on the number and then move it to add a certain number or move it backwards, even below 0 to deal with negative numbers. So a number line for that sort of moving around it makes possible that sort of moving around. And so a number line has to be in UEB with Nemeth because it's associated with calculation. And there are really specific symbols for even using Braille cells for number lines in Nemeth Code. All right, we've got 3 more. Partitioned numbers. We already touched on how if a number is partitioned, if it's broken up into pieces or separated for clarity by spaces in lieu of commas, especially, there's a really specific Nemeth Code rule for that, and it's just a space between the lower cell Nemeth numbers. Partitioned numbers go in Nemeth Code. Anything dealing with probability, those sort of often has a P, and then it'll be a parenthetical that says like the probability of A, the P, A. Those probability statements have to be in Nemeth Code. And last but not least, a slash in mathematical context. Now we're going to talk about slashes also that are in literary context. So when it's functioning as part of the sentence, when it's just between words and it's not indicating divided by, a slash is punctuation. But when a slash is between parts of a fraction, or a slash is between measurements that indicate something per something, well, there's some calculation going on there, and that has to be in Nemeth Code. So that's 12 things. I put this slide in that says, why switch codes, in hopes of riling up some strong opinions in the chat or elsewhere. So if you have a burning question about why are we even switching? What's UEB with Nemeth? How does that kind of thing work? We're not going to go too deep into those weeds right here. And there are answers out there. There are some beautiful thought processes about the use of Nemeth Code and how switching between codes works. But in short, the purpose of code switching is to indicate text which is transcribed in a Braille code other than UEB. So it improves our clarity when we enclose things in bubbles or love notes. When I think about those 12 things we've touched on, I tend to think about them in these 2 ways. First way, expressions indicating calculation. So this is the fractions, right? They've got that line that basically indicates division. Series of letters. I appreciate that series is not really the appropriate pluralization of series, but any series of letters, when they're being multiplied together, indicates calculation. So that categorization helps me hold on to what admittedly is a big list of at least 12 things that must be in Nemeth Code. What else expresses or indicates calculation? Number lines, the way that we talked about. If you're putting your finger on a number and then moving your number you move your finger a number of times to indicate addition, or in the other direction, move your finger to indicate subtraction, that number line is working for calculation. And that is one way of thinking about why number lines must be in Nemeth Code. Probability statements clearly indicate a calculation of how many possibilities are and how many possibilities are there and how likely is any one of those possibilities. And bookending this list of expressions indicating calculation as the first category of things that must be in Nemeth Code, we had fractions to start, and we might be closing out with slashes in mathematical context. So when a slash happens between things and it means division, or it could mean division, then it goes in Nemeth Code. The other category, another way to break down those 12 items, is symbols for which there is a Nemeth Code rule. This includes abbreviated function names, chemistry. There's a whole code for it, right? We had a shiny glowing heart for it earlier, a neon heart. Any letter associated with a shape or an abbreviated function name, when we're getting specific enough to give names to shapes, we are firmly in the warm waters of Nemeth Code territory. And any letter or number that's modified, so it's combined often with something like a superscript or a prime. Again, we're getting really specific about how that number or letter is functioning really mathematically specific about what its function is. And so it has to be in Nemeth Code. In the Nemeth Code, if a symbol is included, that obviously is has to be in Nemeth Code because there's a symbol for it. Partition, and it's especially if it's part of a math expression. And partitioned numbers we've talked about a couple of times. They have those spaces between them. So with those categories, and or if you're a whiz, that just full list of 12 unadulterated in mind, let's look at a tiny little word problem. Francis has the Arabic numeral 2, apples. And as we look at this, please think about what's going to need to be in Nemeth Code and what's not. Rowena has Arabic numeral 4, apples. If Rowena and Francis combine their apples, open parentheses, using 2 plus 4, close parentheses, comma, how many apples do they have altogether? We got anybody itching with itchy fingers who wants to put in the chat what must be in Nemeth Code in these three sentences? Yeah, I feel you. That 2 plus 4, there is clearly calculation going on, and we've got a Nemeth Code symbol or a mathematical symbol, the plus sign. So that fragmentary expression, number 2 plus 4, is going to be followed by a Nemeth Code terminator and preceded by an opening Nemeth Code indicator. Now, the way that I typed that in to start out with, all of that doesn't fit on one line. I'm going to get all of my content in here and then zhuzh my format, including line breaks. And that's it. Nothing else in this word problem must be in Nemeth Code. These unmodified numbers 2 and 4, no need. So what have we got? We've got Francis has, and then just a simple number 2. No need for code switching. It's a 2 in UEB, perfectly legible. Capital Rowena has, and then a number 4 in UEB, apples. Nothing is getting sucked in with the number. It's just all in UEB. If Cap Rowena and Cap Francis combine their apples, okay, we're opening parentheses using, and then we're opening Nemeth Code for the 2 plus 4, then that's all we needed Nemeth Code for. We're just going to terminate it and let that punctuation that helps the sentence flow and make sense happen outside the Nemeth Code bubble. So we ended Nemeth Code after the 2 plus 4, and then we just put in our closing round bracket, also known as a parenthesis, and our comma. How many apples do they have altogether? I love that short form. Question mark. We always use indented paragraphs in a UEB with Nemeth transcription. So my first line starts in cell 3, and then I want to check on that bubble. It's all together on one Braille line, which is what we want. Once we got everything in there, it resolved so that open Nemeth Code 2 plus 4, close Nemeth Code is all on one Braille line. Let's do another one. This is just 2 sentences. The fraction 1/2 of a pizza is Arabic numeral 2 slices, period. It's a little pizza. How many pieces is 100%, and this is the percent sign, not the word percent, of the pizza? Okay, but for real, those slices of pizza better be New York pizza style big. If the whole pizza is 4 slices, they better be the size of my face. Or maybe it's a personal pan pizza. So what has to be in Nemeth Code here? We've very comfortably established previously that number 2 doesn't need to be in Nemeth Code. It'll be perfectly fine just in UEB. That half and the 100%, I see you. Yes, has to be in Nemeth Code. So if we were to transcribe this tiny little word problem, our half has to be in Nemeth Code. So I might set up my bubble to start out with by putting in an opening Nemeth code indicator and a Nemeth code terminator. You got to have a space after the opening Nemeth code indicator, and you got to have a space before the Nemeth code terminator in line with text. So I've just given myself a little place to put my cursor between those. And yes, I've made shortcuts and hotkeys and macros to just insert those code switch indicators. What happens in the bubble? Well, the half, of course. And this little guy is a Nemeth code fraction, has the opening Nemeth code fraction indicator and the closing Nemeth code fraction indicator. The numerator is 1 and the denominator is 2. And in print, the 1 is directly over the 2 and the fraction line is horizontal. So in Nemeth code, we just use our 1 cell horizontal fraction line, simple horizontal fraction line. So that's going to be dots 3, 4. And that's in a bubble. Let's just be extra format aware and make this an indented paragraph because we only use indented, no blocked paragraphs in a UEB with Nemeth transcription. Of a pizza is, we already said it, our number 2 is, it's unmodified. It is only an Arabic numeral, ain't no decimal, ain't no partitioning. It's going to be fine in UEB. Slices, period. Space, capital, how, space, yes, computer, I see you really want to tell me about something. Everything's okay. How many pieces is, so we know that the percent has to be in Nemeth code. So I'm just gonna, while I'm thinking about it, enclose that. And then that percent is making the 100 a modified number. So all of the number 100 and then the 2 cell Nemeth percent is in a Nemeth code love note. Of the pizza question mark. Now I fully appreciate, and you might not be thinking about this, but let's get it out in the open. The words of the, even the word of, can be used in a narrative description of a math expression. So sometimes instead of saying something times something, we say something of something and we say, oh, that means multiplication. And because there isn't some symbol of comparison, it's safe to think that this of is part of the sentence and is not part of a greater math expression because we don't see a symbol of comparison around. So in this little example, what has to be in Nemeth code is the percent and the number that it's modifying by combining with, and the fraction. I feel embarrassed including a 2 trains are driving toward each other example. So I will transcribe this if you really want me to. And I would like to just maybe talk about what has to be in Nemeth code for it. So in this example, what has to be in Nemeth code? 2 trains are driving toward one another. The first train leaves Amherst at 5 o'clock A period M period. Now, our digital time, that's just part of a sentence. It's not being added to something or whatever. There's no plus sign right next to it. Digital time, 90% of the time, perfectly good in UEB. Traveling at 60, well, that's just a little number. That's just a regular number. Maybe it could be in UEB. Miles per hour, written as MI/HR. Gosh darn it. That means that slash is basically indicating division. It's miles divided into hours. So this whole little abbreviation thing where the slash means per, that's going to have to be in Nemeth code. And then it's going to loop in its associated number. So you get the whole value of 60 miles per hour. That's all going to be in a Nemeth code love note. Probably, yeah, without the period. The second train leaves Buchel or Buchel is what they say in Louisville, at 7 a.m. So AM is an abbreviation, but it's not being divided by anything. And 7 is just a regular number, so it's not needing Nemeth code. Moving on. Same thing goes for traveling at 70 mph. I mean, mph is an abbreviation, and there isn't actually a symbol here indicating calculation, so it's just an abbreviation and an unmodified number staying in UEB. The distance between Amherst and Buchel is 455.5 miles. Hold on. This is a decimal. This is indicating this is 5/10, and a decimal has to be in a Nemeth Code love note. Now, this having to be in Nemeth Code would pull in something that were little and abbreviated, some sort of abbreviated unit of measure, but the word miles isn't going to get pulled into the love note with 455.5. But that decimal, right up there with fractions, got to be in Nemeth Code. So again, this is my lazy list of what goes in Nemeth Code. This is a picture of a sink on the screen full of dirty dishes. Let me just tell you, when my kitchen is full of dirty dishes, it doesn't look like this. Usually there's more dishes than this, so everything has to be strategically stacked. And my kitchen is not so cute with blue tile and a lace curtain over the window that you can look out while you're washing dishes. It's the cutest dish of the cutest sink of dirty dishes I've ever seen. To go with what's a kind of cute down and dirty list of what goes in Nemeth Code. So this is the when I'm in a hurry checklist that I use for, oh, did I catch everything in this word problem? Are there fractions, decimals, operation or comparison symbols? Is there anything else indicating calculation, like a slash meaning per? Is there any money? And is there anything else that I remember? So the quick ones are fractions, decimal, plus, minus, divided by, equals, greater than, less than, are operation and comparisons. Anything indicating calculation, and any currency. When pressed, this is my dirty list, short and dirty list of what has to be in Nemeth Code. Fractions, decimals, the pluses, the minuses, the equals, and then a couple of other categories that we've touched on before. Here comes another quiz. All right, get your ABCD typing fingers ready. Which of the following options shows only things that must be in Nemeth Code? Answer choice A is 5, the Arabic numeral 5, the symbol plus, Arabic numeral 5. Also, just the letter X, and 89 and the percent sign. Answer choice B is H subscript 2, capital O. I'm taking your drink of water. The decimal 2.5, and the word triangle. Item C has the following three components: 1,592, the fraction with a diagonal line, half, and the angle symbol B, meaning angle B. Lastly, answer choice D has three components. It's the decimal 7.3, or 7 3/10, X plus, the plus symbol, Y, and the numeral 23 combined with a degree symbol. Which of those options shows only things that must be in Nemeth Code? I see the chat looks a little bit like a beatbox. It goes duh, 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 duh. Yeah, only answer choice D there shows only things that must be in Nemeth Code. In the other answer choices, the things that are not required to be in Nemeth Code include the unmodified letter X, when an individual letter variable is hanging out doing its thing, not combined with anything else. It's perfectly fine in UEB. The word triangle, it's not part of any greater, like triangle equals square or triangle is greater than something. Just the word triangle is fine in UEB. And the unmodified number 1,592. If you want to take a moment to think about it, each of these things, and I kind of said it, each of these things could be in a scenario where it would have to be in Nemeth Code. For example, if 1,592 were a partitioned number and it were just one space 592, then again, it would be a partitioned number and it would have to be in Nemeth Code because there is a very explicit Nemeth Code rule about how to transcribe partitioned numbers. Let's look at all the things from that quiz. First, we've got, has to be in Nemeth Code, number 5 plus 5. Remembering to bop our Nemeth Code numbers on the head so that the 5 is dots 2, 6. And then we have our single cell plus sign and another lower cell 5. Not required by itself to be in Nemeth Code, the letter X, we've got to have some grade 1 symbol indicator before it so it isn't the alphabetic word sign it, but that letter X would just be transcribed dots 5, 6, dots 1, 4, 1, 3, 4, 6. And in Nemeth Code, we have 89%. So our percent symbol is dot 4 and dots 3, 5, 6. And a percent is a mathematical symbol, a Nemeth Code symbol. It has to be in Nemeth Code anywhere that it appears, the percent symbol. Also in Nemeth Code is capital H, subscript 2, capital O, H2O, the chemical formula for water. And this 2 is not only bopped on the head so that it's in the lower part of the cell and can't be misread as any letter, it also is coming right after a letter, so it is automatically in the subscript position. We don't need any sort of subscript indicator for the 2 in H2O. 2.5, so that's going to be 2.5. We're using any decimal, has to be in Nemeth Code. Decimals, fractions, check them off with number lines, always in Nemeth Code. And our Nemeth Code decimal is dots 4, 6. The word triangle, I mean, on its own merits, it's perfectly fine in UEB. We can imagine scenarios where the word triangle would have to be in Nemeth Code because it's part of a larger math expression, but just being a word isn't enough to put it into our love note of Nemeth Code bubble. And the number 1,592, again, on its own merits, perfectly good in UEB, just an unmodified number. We've got the fraction half. We saw a half earlier when we were talking about that pizza word problem. This fraction has one more cell than that one did because in print, the 1 and 2 are, they have a slash line between them, not a perfectly horizontal line separating the numerator from the denominator. So our 2-cell slash or diagonal fraction line is dots 4, 5, 6, dots 3, 4. And that fraction, as with all fractions, is transcribed in Nemeth Code. The angle sign, that's a mathematical symbol. Very specific Nemeth Code rule for that symbol, Nemeth Code symbol. Anywhere we have an angle symbol, just like the percent or the degree, always going to be in Nemeth Code. This particular angle symbol has a name. It's angle B. And so that letter that's naming a shape has to be in our Nemeth Code love note. The next one's a decimal, right? And decimals, fractions, number lines always go in Nemeth Code. And x plus y has that plus, indicating calculation. For the same reason as our 5 plus 5 at the beginning of the list is in Nemeth Code, x plus y is also in Nemeth Code. And last but not least, 23 and the degree symbol, which in Nemeth Code is transcribed as a superscript hollow dot. So the hollow dot symbol is the 2-cell dots 4, 6, dot 1, 6. And that's preceded by the superscript indicator to make the degree. And that's modifying a number, just like our percent sign in an earlier example. And our degree symbol in 89, earlier in this list, are modifying the number that they're attached to. So that number also goes in Nemeth Code. So we have 23 degrees. There are some beautiful turns of phrase in the Nemeth Code. So one set of beautiful phrases in the Nemeth Code is, quote, a mathematical expression or chemical formula, including isolated signs and fragmentary expressions, keeping in mind that a mathematical expression contains at least one mathematical symbol. I like this series of key phrases because it gives us a little bit of context for the term mathematical symbol and gives us a little bit of definition to distinguish a mathematical expression from the broader way we use the word expression, right? Because let the cat out of the bag is an expression. 17 slices of pizza and Avery ate 4 is potentially also a mathematical expression describing a subtraction problem. And when we're talking about code switching and we talk about a mathematical expression, we're talking about something that contains at least one mathematical symbol. Okay, so what is a mathematical symbol? I'll tell you what, the best I can confidently offer you is a negative definition. A mathematical symbol is not a word. It's a symbol. And it is not punctuation. So some examples of mathematical symbols, because examples are kind of like illustrations, they're worth 1,000 words, are a percent sign, a cross multiplication sign, equals, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to. And these fraction lines we've touched on a couple of times, as well as any Greek letters. And other examples included in this slide, we'll come back to Greek letters in just a minute. Other examples included on this slide are the double struck or blackboard bold R, the R meaning the set of all real numbers. So this is the R that, what does it look like? It makes me think of, it makes me think of banks and columns, but it's called a double struck. And also the capital sigma. Any of these is a mathematical symbol. Please note, like we said earlier, the word of can describe multiplication, but only really the multiplication sign, cross multiplier, or the dot multiplier are mathematical symbols. I see in the chat a request to talk a little bit about lowercase Greek letters. So lowercase Greek letters, that's along the lines of pi or theta, or, there's obviously a whole alphabet of them. The most common one perhaps that we see is pi. And those are Nemeth Code symbols. So a Greek letter of any kind must be in Nemeth Code. Even if, so definitely, okay, let's talk about pi. Definitely if we have pi equals 3.1415, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole equation, a whole math expression. Everything from pi through 3.14159 has to be in Nemeth Code. But even if pi appears in a sentence like a joke, right? What's your favorite, what's a math teacher's favorite dessert? Pi. Oh, sorry, it auto-capitalized. This pi would have to be in Nemeth Code because lowercase Greek letters are Nemeth Code symbols, a lot like the percent sign, the degree sign, etc. Those are Nemeth Code symbols and have to be in Nemeth Code. So our transcription of this terrible joke would be, come here, text. Oh, good heavens. Weird. Here we go. What's a math teacher's favorite, not desert, dessert? DESSERT question mark. And then the punchline is in Nemeth Code. So let's make ourselves a bubble and then put in our pi and We could probably be here all day having a nerdy discussion about whether that exclamation point that I typed for the punchline is punctuation and goes outside the Nemeth Code switch indicators, or whether the person who wrote this joke is feeling super extra and they're treating it as a factorial, which has a Nemeth Code symbol, which I believe is probably that. Let's call it punctuation for our purposes here and put it outside the Nemeth Code switch indicators as sentence level punctuation. Let me know, please, if you have further questions about Greek letters or lowercase Greek letters, but all Greek letters, whether capitalized like sigma in our pretty common sigma notation, or pi, which is usually lowercase in our equations for our formulae for circles and whatnot, all Greek letters go in Nemeth Code. All right, please get your answer fingers ready. Which of the following is not an expression that contains at least one mathematical symbol? So which of the following doesn't have any mathematical symbols? Answer choice A is the Arabic numeral 2 plus sign Arabic numeral 2. Answer B is the words 10 minus 7. Answer C, answer choice C, is the Arabic numeral 100 greater than Arabic numeral 65. Which of these doesn't have any mathematical symbols? Yeah, it's like a hive up in here. Answer choice B, the phrase all words 10 minus 7 does not contain even one mathematical symbol because a mathematical symbol is not a word. In the other answer choices, there's a plus and a greater than. On the slide in front of us, these symbols are discussed, not disgusted, we are discussing them with dot locators for mention before them. And the actual symbols for plus is .346, and the symbol for greater than is 2 cells. It's dots 4, 6, and 2. And I am trying, and I hope mostly succeeding, in saying the word symbol when I'm talking about a Braille symbol, and saying the word sign when I'm talking about print, because the Nemeth Code tells us to do that and say symbols are Braille. And when we're in the Nemeth Code, signs are print. Time to shift gears. Remember how we got our fork out for the meat of what must go in UEB? And I gave you some sink full of dirty dishes down a dirty list, including decimals and fractions and percent signs and Greek letters. And now let's talk about what must go in UEB and get out our spoons for this literary discussion. First of all, we've been talking for a while now about when we are already in a UEB with Nemeth transcription. But let's take a big step back for a moment and talk about the before a transcription starts decision, because UEB with Nemeth isn't something that applies to absolutely every book, every transcription project you're going to work on. Something like Charlotte's Web is a novel with no significant amount or strong use of mathematical symbols. Something like Charlotte's Web is going to be transcribed using only UEB. In other words, literary works which use only occasional mathematical terminology and notation are transcribed entirely in UEB. The picture to go along with this also includes a newspaper. Our newspapers are 99 times out of 100 going to be transcribed using only UEB, even if there is an occasional percent sign. And so when in those non-technical works, when the whole dang book uses just UEB, why we must use the UEB symbol for percent or for decimals or for anything else that in a UEB with Nemeth context, we would use Nemeth code symbols for. We don't have access to those in a literary only UEB transcription. You knew this was coming. Conversely, technical works use UEB with Nemeth. So in mathematics, statistics, physics, chemistry, symbols and rules of the Nemeth Code are used. So this is going to be a UEB with Nemeth transcription. And those Nemeth Code symbols, the combination of UEB with Nemeth is also used in other fields, not just those specifically named, any work which makes strong use of mathematical signs and modes of expression. I think this decision-making process about what's a literary work or a non-technical work and what's a technical work or technical transcription, that decision process has been around for a while. So I'm not going to go too deep into the weeds with it, but I wanted us to take a moment and stir our coffee, take a step back, say not every single transcription that you ever do will be a UEB with Nemeth transcription, and I appreciate that. And anywhere that you're going to use just UEB, like for a novel, like Pride and Prejudice, maybe, you would just use UEB, including all UEB symbols, no Nemeth Code symbols in a purely UEB transcription. But if we were in a technical work, transcribing a math book, a math worksheet, what must be in UEB? So we talked about what has to be in Nemeth, but what has to be in UEB? Slashes in literary context. When they're just dividing a word and there's no division happening, that's just punctuation. Just a slash between and/or. His/her has to be in UEB, that slash punctuation. Also a title, like of a table or a section, or heaven forbid, well, I knew until I was going to tell you, the learning categories, the Common Core segments that are identified often by a series of letters and numbers divided by a period. Those periods are not decimals, they're just punctuation. And that's basically a title or label for that section of a document. That's got to go in UEB because it's not indicating calculation. Transcriber's notes. The only enclosing a note transcriber's note indicators we have are UEB note, transcriber's note indicators. 2 or more words that are part of narrative text. Those have to be outside of the love note, can't be in a bubble. If you've got narrative that is 2 or more words, it just can't be between switch indicators at all. So for example, in the direction review section 3:8 and practice 1:A, there's nothing here that goes in Nemeth Code. Everything here must be in UEB. So our 3:8 is transcribed using UEB, where we have just the upper cell 3, the period is a period is a period, sort of decimal, and then the number 8. I'm trying to fight my inclination to quote lots of UEB rules. I'm not going to talk about how a decimal allows numeric mode to continue. No, stop, Kyle. That's not why we're here. Okay. And cap practice 1 period, and then we need a grade 1 symbol indicator so that this UEB A isn't misread as a 1. Also, if we had any transcriber's note enclosed, any transcriber's note where you're explaining something is going to be enclosed in the UEB transcriber's note indicators, because those are the only transcriber's note indicators that we have. So that has to happen outside of a bubble. Which, the more I think about it, is a little heartbreaking. In homage to it being Valentine's Day, let me explore that analogy a little bit. I've heard transcribers' notes described as secret messages being passed between the transcriber and the student. And I think that's a fun way to think about it. And so in our theme today, it would seem like those would be Nemeth, but it's not. So these particular notes, particularly because we try to be very professional with our transcribers notes, it's probably appropriate that all transcribers notes explaining something have to be in UEB. We're not passing love notes in a transcriber's note. We're explaining what's happening in the document, and that happens in UEB. Last but not least, in the example, use a pen and /or pen to mark up the exercise. Everything here has to be happening in UEB. This is a slash in literary context. This slash does not mean per or divided by. It's just punctuation and must be in UEB. We talked at some length at the beginning of this session about our primary sources for Nemeth Code and how the Nemeth Code 2022 is coming down to us. It's just getting ready for sharing. What is our primary source for UEB? The rulebook, and it handily is called Rules of UEB. And that does include the guidelines for technical material, which is saved as a separate PDF, sometimes bound separately, but the guidelines for technical material is an extension of the rules of UEB, and that's our primary source, our foundational rule book for UEB. And this resource is available from ICEB's website if you don't already have this somewhere. The rules of UEB can be found at iceb.org under the link Unified English Braille. And there's a series of resources listed here, the volumes of the BRF that make up rules of UEB, as well as a printable or a linked explorable rules of UEB PDF. And then there's some updates to those rules from ICEB. That's the International Council on English Braille, iceb.org. Here's another quiz. In a novel like Charlotte's Web, what would be the correct transcription of $2.15 and then a question mark? Answer choice A shows $2.15 transcribed in UEB. Answer choice B shows $2.15 transcribed in Nemeth Code. So in a novel like Charlotte's Web, where we're dealing with a purely literary transcription, a non-technical work, then the correct transcription would be UEB, because for the whole novel, Charlotte's Web, we're only using UEB. I just don't want us to lose track and go away from here with the hammer. From the analogy, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You're going to go away with a hammer of knowing what must be in Nemeth Code and having a clearer understanding of what must be in Nemeth, what must be in UEB, and a couple of things that can be in either. And with that understanding, it's tempting to transcribe everything in UEB with Nemeth, but not everything gets transcribed in UEB with Nemeth. A letter home to parents often would be transcribed in just UEB. Charlotte's Web, just UEB. Pride and Prejudice, just UEB, so on and so forth. All right, we have a few more minutes and we're going to go beyond bubbles. That is not just what must be in Nemeth Code or what must be in UEB, but what can be in either code. Some things can be in either Nemeth Code or UEB, and we get to decide which code they go in, depending upon which placement gives us the best code switch indicator flow or placement and makes the content most clear. So item identifiers are a really classic example. If I have a series of exercise items, the first 5 are just 1 plus 2, 4 plus 3, 7 plus 9, a series of math expressions, all of my identifiers for those can be in Nemeth Code because their content is. But then the next item might be a word problem about Francis and Rowena go apple picking and blah, blah, blah. And the identifier for that word problem can be in UEB because that allows our smooth switching. Our item identifiers can be in either code. Punctuation can be in either code. Depending upon what allows us to reduce the number of switch indicators. There are Nemeth Code rules for commas and periods, and when we have a whole series of Nemeth material, we don't we are not forced to switch out of Nemeth code for punctuation, because punctuation can be in either code, and we get to decide which code it is based on what lets us have the fewest number of switch indicators and makes content most clear. An abbreviated unit of measure, so just like CM or IN period, those abbreviated units of measure, they could be either place. Sometimes they get locked in and sucked into a Nemeth code bubble with like a decimal that has to be in Nemeth code, but an abbreviated unit of measure can be right next to 7, saying, hey, this is 7 cm long, and everything is okay in UEB, because that lets us not switch for the abbreviated unit of measure. A number, we've seen a number of these. Oh God. We've seen a number of these unmodified numbers in our examples where they can be in either code. If we had 5 equals 7 plus 2, that first number is unmodified, but it's in an equation, so it goes in Nemeth code. If we're talking about like I have 7 apples, that 7 unmodified is fine in UEB. So we base where our unmodified number goes depending upon what can let us switch less. Again, unmodified letter, just an individual letter that's a variable, it's okay in either code. We look at the stuff around it to say, if I leave this in UEB, does it mean that I can have fewer switches? And that's true of any of the things in this list, including the transcriber defined shape indicator. This, I think, is the fanciest of the things that can be in Nemeth code or UEB, because it's a sort of special exception. It is a UEB symbol based on a UEB rule, but we can define a shape. We as transcribers can create a shape for something, some wacko icon that doesn't exist otherwise. There's a picture of a wizard. Neither UEB nor Nemeth code provides a wizard icon symbol, so we would make up a shape, and that very specific made up shape for a wacky icon could be in Nemeth code or UEB. A lot for the same reason that identifiers can be in either code, so that we can reduce the amount of switching, code switching that we have to do. So for example, if I had the phrase choose from, and then the fraction half, comma, fraction quarter, fraction, sorry, comma, word, or fraction 3/4, that punctuation that's happening between items in a series of Nemeth is in Nemeth code. So my mathematical fraction in Nemeth code is .6, and a comma following a fraction has to be a .6 comma in Nemeth code, and my Nemeth code gets to continue from half all the way through the last fraction 3/4. So the full transcription happening here is cap choose from open Nemeth code, the fraction 1/2 end fraction, comma, the fraction 1/4 end fraction, comma, and then for just one word, we can use the single word switch indicator, which says, hey, until you get to a space, we're in UEB, or, okay, we're all done with UEB. Fraction 3/4, close the fraction, all done with Nemeth code, our sentence ending period. Because punctuation can be in either code, depending upon what helps make our content clear. So this period belongs to the sentence. Putting it outside Nemeth code helps that be clear, and also reduces, we also want to reduce the number of switch indicators, which is why our punctuation between all this list of fractions are in Nemeth. I would love to talk through all the cells of this binomial theorem, but we don't have time. So let me just point out the binomial theorem itself is enclosed in parentheses. Because everything inside those parentheses is Nemeth code material, the parentheses themselves get pulled in to Nemeth code, because all they enclose is Nemeth or technical mathematical material. And the parentheses that enclose the words Darla's sister are punctuation also, And that's happening in UEB because we don't have to switch into Nemeth Code just for parentheses. Parentheses can be in either code and help us, whatever helps us not have switches. I mentioned these earlier, that transcriber-defined shape can be used for wacky icons. Often it's a pencil. It's not usually a wizard. It's like a pencil or a pen that is next to certain items. And when you make a symbol for that, because neither UEB nor Nemeth Code provides a specific symbol for that one-off icon, then we can use that transcriber-defined shape in either UEB or Nemeth Code, whichever allows us to have fewer code switches. All right, so one more beyond bubbles category. What lets Nemeth Code just roll on? What has no effect on code switching? Structural things. So a page change has no effect on what code is in effect. If Nemeth Code has been opened and it hasn't yet been closed by a terminator, the fact that we are turning a Braille page doesn't matter. Nemeth Code is still in effect. The fact that we get to a print page change indicator, the series of dots 3, 6 across the page, has no effect on the Nemeth Code still being active. So our bubble can continue on over a Braille page change, a print page change. If we have the structural elements, a running head, or like a print page number at the top right of a Braille page, our bubbles are not burst by any of these structural elements. Or you could say our Nemeth Code just barrels on through any of these page change material. So page changes and their accessories have no effect on code switching. I'm tempted to belabor this example that's on the screen, but it's basically just a very simplified picture of 2 print pages and a Nemeth Code bubble that extends from the end of line 20 on one Braille page, and with no problem, the Nemeth Code barrels on over a print page change indicator, a Braille page number, a Braille page change, a running head, a print page number at the top right of a Braille page, continues on until we terminate Nemeth Code. On beyond pages, what other structural elements have no effect on code switching? We already saw it, a running head. A running footer, by the exact same logic, has no effect on code switching. A box line, a note separation line, and a column separation line. Any of those, they don't break the Nemeth Code. They don't burst the bubble. They just barrel on through. Here's our last quiz. I assume you're not warming up your fingers before you type in your answer, but for some reason I'm picturing you doing so. Quiz number 5 asks, which of the following options shows only things that must be in Nemeth Code? Answer choice A is models 12 period 3 period 89 period 0 ampersand 7 period 1. Answer choice B is numeral 5, the word oranges, equals sign, number 20, Arabic numeral 20, the word kumquats. Answer choice C says cap find, just the letter X or the variable X, using the fraction 3 over 4 and then X right next to it for multiplication, equals sign Arabic numeral 99. Last but not least, answer choice D says 9:00 space PM : Arabic numeral 2.5 inch shadow. So which one has only things that must be in Nemeth Code? So the only answer that is made up exclusively of what has to be in Nemeth code is B, which is the math equation, 5 oranges equals 20 kumquats. The other answer choices include model numbers. So those are up there with sections, section titles or chapter titles, or heaven forbid, Common Core sections, where those periods are not decimals. They are punctuation. They don't indicate any sort of calculation. And so model numbers are transcribed in UEB. Answer choice C has the word find and then the individual variable X and the word using. None of that must be in Nemeth code. None of that is forced to be in Nemeth code. What is forced to be in Nemeth code is the fraction and also the multiplication, fraction times variable, and even further, the whole equation, 3/4 x equals 99. And last but not least, answer choice D included the digital time, 9:00 p.m. And that's just a label sort of for what comes after, like a diary entry. 9:00 p.m. : and then the description, a 2.5-inch shadow. So decimals, right? That's up there with my quick and dirty list. Fractions, decimals, percents, and other math symbols have to be in Nemeth code. The decimal 2.5 has to be in Nemeth code, and then it draws in with it the word inch that it's yoked with a hyphen. So the whole hyphenated word is either in the bubble or not. Inch can't escape because it's tied to that decimal. And so 2.5 has to be in Nemeth code. The thing that's attached to it with a hyphen has to be in Nemeth code as well. But the word shadow is not part of an equation or comparison statement. It's just a word and is outside of Nemeth code. It's not forced to be in Nemeth code. The only thing that's forced to be in this quiz is 5 oranges equals 20 kumquats, all parts of that equation, which is a silly, silly equation. So what did we do today? Looking back, we took our step to overview and talked a little bit about how non-technical works use all UEB, including percent symbols and Greek letters if they come up in something like Charlotte's Web. UEB with Nemeth is for technical works, and we make that decision before we start on the book or worksheet or test. We talked from a couple of perspectives, right? Quick and dirty, short and sweet, a full 12 items about certain things that must be in Nemeth code, particularly including expressions indicating calculation and mathematical symbols. Some things must be in UEB, which includes transcriber's notes. Anything enclosed in transcriber's note indicators, those transcriber note indicators are in UEB, they gotta be. And literary material. A couple of things can be in either. If we move on beyond bubbles, we can have punctuation, transcriber defined shape indicator, identifiers. They can be in either code so that we can make choices that let us switch codes as little as possible and help keep everything clear, the meaning of text clear. I love those structural components that just let the Nemeth code barrel on. Page changes, page changes, page changes, right? 3 or 4 different kinds of page changes. None of those has any effect on code switching, as well as running headers, running footers, page numbers. And last but not least, this is just life advice, I feel like, consult primary sources when possible. Our secondary sources like instruction manuals are useful for study and analysis, and our foundations of Braille transcription are the code books themselves. Thank you very much for going on this journey with me past the dirty sink and the sweetened condensed milk and the throwing paper airplanes to go on beyond bubbles. If you need to, you can contact me at kdjute@aph.org.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kyle. That was phenomenal. I don't know how you do it, but you always make this material so interesting and engaging. And I always learn so much when I take part with your presentations. They're just phenomenal. So thank you again for joining us. I'd like to thank Allie and Jessica once again, our captioners, for being with us today. Kyle, if you will just stop sharing your screen for just a minute, I can share mine and we can finish up our last few housekeeping items. If you are, we really ask you to do this short survey for us. We do need it so we can continue doing presentations like this for you. I am going to put in the chat box the link. So if that works better for you, it's only 4 short questions. It should not take you any time at all. I'm going to give you just a minute so you can pull that up. And then once the evaluation is done, if you are interested in in-service credit, you can use this why is it not coming to me right now?
QR?
The QR code. Thank you very much. The closing code is symbol. So I will put that in the chat box as well. The closing code is symbol, and the link to that in-service credit form, I will add that to the chat box as well. In case that is helpful for everyone or anyone. Once again, we thank you very much for being here with us today. And if you do need to get in touch with us, these are all of the ways that you can stay in contact. This presentation was recorded. There was so much valuable information in it. So it will be up on our website probably within the next week. Give us a little bit of time to do that, but it will be up and available to you there if you forgot or just want to go back and refer to it again. I'm going to stop recording now.